Today we're going to improve the performance and looks of this 2021 Mustang GT with a new set of shocks and struts from Koni. These Koni active shocks and struts are going to fit your 2015 and up GT V6 or EcoBoost as long as it's not equipped with a factory MagneRide suspension. Now what the active is designed to do is almost mimic how MagneRide works, but as an affordable aftermarket alternative. And what Koni is using is frequency selective dampening technology. What that basically means is the shock is going to almost adjust to how you're driving and how the road is. So if you're on curvy roads or whatever, it's going to perform as a high performance shock and strut. But when you go over bumps in the road or potholes and stuff like that, it's going to absorb them, make for a comfortable ride. So all the benefits of high performance and comfort in one shock and strut setup. Now since we're upgrading to a brand new set of Konis all the way around, at the same time we're going to throw some Acceltech springs on this car, which will work perfectly with the damping technology from Koni. We're going to start with the front suspension by removing the factory strut from the passenger side. What you can do is go up in the engine bay. There's 3 studs that are at the top of the strut tower. You're going to remove 2 of those bolts, but leave 1 still tight. All right, so now down the wheel well, we're going to pop the wheel off and remove the caliper and set it aside. All right, the caliper out of the way, now we're going to remove the sway bar.
As you can see, there's a slot in the back for a wrench, so hold it on the back, grab your socket.
All right, now we're going to pop off the ABS line and then remove the 2 bolts that hold the strut to the spindle. The bolts are splined, so you have to hammer them out.
Before you remove the nut all the way, leave it on partially so you can hammer the bolt out.
I can reach back up and remove that last strut nut and then remove the strut assembly. You have to compress the factory spring to get the strut cap off. Now you can rent a tool like this at most auto parts stores. We happen to have a wall mounted one and we're going to use that.
Before installing your new strut, grab the old isolator off the old shock, reinstall it. Slide the plastic washer on top of the bump stop, then install your spring cap. With everything in place, then tighten down your strut nut.
All right, well, Brendan's assembling the other strut. I'm going to start putting this side back together. Now line up the spindle. Connect the ABS line and bolt the sway bar on. With everything done down in the wheel well, now you can tighten up these strut nuts. You're going to torque these to 46 foot-pounds. Okay, they're being tight. Reinstall the rotor and the caliper, and then repeat the process on the other side. All right, the front done, we're gonna move on to the rear. We're gonna start by removing the 2 bolts from the shock mount to the body. Now we're gonna remove the 2 lower bolts, which are gonna be through the bottom of the control arm. and remove your shock. Now, since we have to lower the cradle down to get the spring off, you want to remove the bracket for the brake line to give you some more room. So like I said, to get the spring out, you have to lower down the subframe. There's 2 bolts that hold the subframe in. Before you can actually lower it, you have to remove this bracket from the front by removing the 2 small bolts. All right, remove the bolts now that hold the subframe in. Before you do this, make sure you put a jack or pull jack underneath to support the rear, because we're going to lower it down. Now you can pull down on the subframe and carefully remove the spring. All right, now we can install our new SLTech spring. Now when you put this in, you want to make sure the spring is seated properly in the lower control arm as well as the upper. In the lower, you're going to turn it, and there's a notch it'll turn into. All right, once the spring's seated, jack the subframe back into place, reinstall the bolts. We're going to install our new Koni shock. First thing you're going to do, grab the factory stock, take the cap off the top, remove the nut, and remove the mount. Now you install the Koni supplied bump stop. It can be kind of a tight fit, then the plastic cover, and then finally the dust cover. Last step before reinstallation is to install the mount and then use the Koni supplied nut. All right, now I'm going to reinstall the shock using the factory hardware. Now on the top, there's 2 alignment pins. You can actually push the shock down, get it underneath those pins, and it'll hold it in place so you can install the bolts. And the last step, with the ABS back in the clip, reinstall the brake line. And you want to repeat the process on the other side. The Koni Active is going to install just like any other shock and strut, and that frequency selective damping technology is going to give you the performance of those expensive electronic suspensions, and it's going to be available for any 2015 and up GT V6 or EcoBoost. Now we're going to get the wheels and tires back on this car and take it for a ride. So I've driven obviously many different cars with the SLTech springs. They're one of our top sellers for the S550. And they work well with the stock shocks and struts, but anytime you lower a car, you're working outside of the normal operating range of the factory pieces. So going with the Koni Actives, it feels completely different. Comfortably firm, that's a thing that would describe it. The car feels solid, it feels planted, but when you hit bumps, it doesn't offset it. Sometimes the suspension gets so firm that you hit a bump, you can kind of feel the wheel kind of shake a little bit. And this thing just kind of sucks up the bumps. I mean, you really, really barely feel them. But yet the response is still, when you push it and want to turn real sharp, it feels really, really good, almost like point and shoot. Like I said, the thought process behind the Konis was that you could get the performance of that, Magna Ride, that electronically adjustable suspension, at a far more affordable price point. And I think it does it. I mean, my 2018 had the Magna Ride, and my 2019 does not, and I can feel a difference. I mean, I've upgraded the suspension on my 19 to coilovers, but stock for stock, you would definitely notice a difference with it. This feels like that, where you've got a really good feeling performance suspension, but when you hit bumps, it doesn't feel that. You don't get that really, really firm feeling you get a lot of aftermarket parts. Because that is always one of the trade-offs. I mean, you want the car to handle better, you tighten everything up, spring rates go up, everything gets tighter. And the trade-off is, bumps and stuff, you feel a lot more. And I'm not going to say they're not there, But like I said, it soaks them up pretty good. It's pretty noticeable because, you know, the stock setup with these is so soft that, you know, it's like riding a couch down the highway sometimes. And, you know, you're giving up performance for ride quality, but, you know, the goal here is not to have to give up ride quality for performance, and in my opinion, they do a great job of doing that. Yeah, the stock suspension when they design them on these cars, especially the non-performance pack cars, I mean, they're designed for comfort first. They perform decent, but it's comfort first. Although I see with the Koni setup here is it allows you to maintain that comfort, but get a much better performing combination. I mean, on corners, I said it is tight and feels really, really good on corners. We're not getting a lot of body roll, nothing like that, but I'm on a really crappy road right now. And like I said, it takes the bumps well. And the best way can basically, you know, close this out is to say, if you were thinking about MagneRide for your 2018 up and you didn't want to spend, I think, $2,000, but you're looking for that kind of performance from an aftermarket setup, you know, the Koni Active is definitely something you want to check out.